Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us from different regions all over the world. Welcome to the webinar, Indigenous Women's Land Rights, Key Challenges and Way Forwards. Thank you for being with us today. Interpretation is available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Bahasa. To activate it, please click on the interpretation icon, the globe, and select your language. Para interpretación, por favor, vean el icono del planetita y seleccionen su lengua. Pour avoir de l'interprétation au français, s'il vous plaît, appuyez le petit planète en bas à droite. Então, para ter acesso à interpretação, você pode achar o ícone do planeta do lado direito, embaixo. We kindly ask you that you keep your microphone muted unless invited to speak during the discussion. My name is Deborah Delgado, and I work for Forest People's Climate, and I'm really honored and humbled to be moderating this webinar. Today's conversation brings together Indigenous women, leaders from Latin America, the Congo Basin, and Indonesia, regions where land is the foundation of life, culture, and collective futures. Across these territories, Indigenous women are leading the defense of land and rights, while continuing to face legal, social, and structural barriers to fully exercise land ownership and cultural governance. This webinar is convened by the Women's Movement of the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities, which united Indigenous and local community women leaders to amplify their voices and leadership on land, biodiversity, and climate. In 2025, Indigenous women had marked important milestones, including the launch of the Indigenous Women Pact for Life at COP30 in Belém, alongside concrete advances in land demarcation in Brazil, driven by Indigenous women's advocacy. We will bring a conversation with outstanding women, Indigenous leaders from GATC Women's Movement, who will share regional perspectives and lived experiences. We have today with us Sarah Omi from the Mesoamerican region, Aissatou Marou from Central Africa and the Congo Basin, Cristiane Julian Pancadaru from Brazil, Marisol Garcia Pagüeño from the Peruvian Amazon, and Davi Anggraini from Indonesia. Following the panel, we are honored to welcome two special guests who will share case studies from Brazil, highlighting recent advances in land demarcation led by Indigenous women in 2025. First, Juliana Alves, cacica of the Genipapo Canindé people and Secretary of Indigenous Peoples of the state of Ceará, will share lessons from the land demarcation process she helped lead in 2025 that coincided with the Indigenous Women March and resulted in a historical territorial recognition in northeastern Brazil. We will then hear from Giovanna Mandulian, a Makushi Wapishana leader, leading the National Secretariat for Coordination and Promotion of Indigenous Rights at Brazil's Ministry of Indigenous Peoples, who will reflect on the ministry engagement in land demarcation process this year, including the historical advances made in the context of COP30. So you can imagine how happy and honored we are to share this conversation with you. The session will conclude with a 40 minutes interactive workshop open to all participants, creating space for dialogue, knowledge exchange, and collective reflections on next steps. With that, let us begin with welcoming our GATC Women's Movement leaders to the discussion. So I would love to give the word to Sarah Omi from AMPB from Mesoamerica, and Better People leader from Panama. And welcome, Sarah. Let's start this conversation. So I have a couple of questions to you. From from your experience as an Indigenous woman and the first Indigenous lawyer from the Embera people, why is access to land so critical for Indigenous women's rights and leadership? And your own family history includes displacement from the land where your mother grew up. How has this experience shaped your commitment and vision as an Indigenous women leader working for land rights today?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Deborah, for that introduction. I would like to extend my greetings to all my sisters with whom I'm sharing this very important space, this webinar that will also allow us to continue to reflect upon the many difficulties we are confronted with, but it will also allow us to propose new ways to build and to contribute to governance in our territories, thanks to all our allies present here today and from the Indigenous women's movement in the Global Alliance. We are very honored to have you here, each one of you here today in this space that allows us to keep moving forward. As far as our region is concerned, Mesoamerica, and more specifically Panama, I would like to tell you that in my community is the FDN Embera, a very small community that suffered tremendously in 1975 because of forced displacement actions in the name of the so called development at the national level in my country. During this process, I have always seen how our ancestors, our grandparents, our parents, our uncles and aunts struggled. This struggle allowed us to understand that this problem doesn't only concern adults, but also the younger generations. We were children back then, and we didn't really know how to connect all these realities. We had to find ways to learn and especially how to contribute from a different perspective. After this event, we realized that to understand and contribute to the struggle, we also needed access to education. We didn't know where this would take us, but it has been very impressive to see what we were able to achieve. We are now in a century in which theoretically, we should have achieved progress in many fields in terms of human rights, especially when it comes to the very recognition of our rights. However, we still see many gaps when it comes to that recognition. We are still not able to see that the goal has been achieved fully to fully respect human rights, our human rights. Now, in 2014, to be more specific, it was only in 2014 when the Inter-American Court issued a sentence against Panama's government because of human rights violations in terms of the recognition of our territorial and ancestral land. So that shouldn't be the way to demand respect for our territories. Although our territories have contributed tremendously to the development of our country for centuries. Throughout this way, we also strive to follow our ancestors' steps, our mother's steps. And I become the first lawyer from my people, the first female lawyer. That was an impressive accomplishment, of course. And I was able to bridge some of the gaps that still hinder our development. Although I had all these resources, I realized that our problems as Indigenous women are wider. They encompass other difficulties and barriers, violence, discrimination, and we are here in the territory and always say that the our main task as women is to say that we take part in governance, that we carry out many types of work in our territories. This is where we start making a positive difference for ourselves. This is where we need to give more visibility, amplify our voices, and have a wider presence. The solutions is are in our hands, in our knowledge, in our thoughts as women, in our knowledge as Indigenous and Bera women. Without us, our communities won't be able to keep moving forward. This is why we continue to advance all these ideals in our territories. We keep our identity alive, our presence keeps our culture alive, and we are very concerned about how we can continue to take care of our families. That is why we are so connected to the care for our land, how we want to live in the land, how we want to exist in our territories. The biggest strength we have lies in this ability of being this ability to create new ideas, new knowledge through medicine, through food sovereignty, through the ways in which we restore our minds, our spirits, and also the territory itself. The territory that has been tremendously affected by forced displacement, the forced displacement that affected our identity, our language, that had a negative impact on our ways of teaching, on our very essence as Embera people. And nevertheless, we still have the legacy of resistance from our grandparents who were able to build a house in which the house in which I was born, the house in which I am still standing strong, trying to work hand in hand with other women who share the same dreams. They also want to improve their life conditions without moving away from their identity, without moving away from our reality. And our new pact in favor of life, the Pact for Life in Brazil, resulted from leadership, the leadership of women like Giovanna, who's also here. She also works for the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples. Women like her and others are, they symbolize, they embody what we need to do, the energy we need to make sure that all women become leaders, not only in their territories, but also as a political advocate. They are taking the lead in processes that go beyond the decision making. I believe that we still need their energy in our regions. We still need to incorporate all these elements to create a better positioning so that violence and discrimination and the ways in which sometimes we as women, sometimes when we escalate, when we go higher, as we go higher, we find barriers. And I believe that unity, that calling to solidarity, to complementarity, it needs to also impact our territories so that we women can have a big open door that will take us to that will allow us to keep sharing and create conditions for hope, the hope that we need to achieve our goals, the goals we have always had in Indigenous women. We want to participate fully and effectively with safeguards, and especially based on that respect that we deserve, because we deserve to be in these spaces. That's what I wanted to share with you here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Very
Zara.
powerful and wholesome. And I would like now to give the word to Aissatou Omaru. As a Mboro woman, sorry if I'm still learning how to pronounce it, from Chad, many of whose people are pastoralists. Land is closely tied to mobility, livelihoods, and cultural survival. How does this pastoralist reality shape Indigenous women's struggles for land rights in Central Africa? And what leadership roles are women taking to protect their territories, ways of life, and future generations? Merci à tout. Je te donne la parole.
I'm not sure that she has arrived yet because there's a lot of people that use my name, so I don't know exactly who they are. But Marisol is here. So you
Okay,
can
no
ask.
worries. Okay, Marisol, hola, ¿cómo estás?
Hello, Marisol. How are you doing? Hi, Marisol. Hello. I will take the floor in English so that I can be translated by the interpreters, okay?
Basin, Indigenous women are frontline defenders of territories under increasing pressure. I know that you are building a network among Peruvian Amazonian women, and I wanted to ask you, how do women link land rights with the protection of life, community resilience, and the prevention of violence? And what does women leadership bring to the collective territorial governance in the Amazon? Adelante, Marisol.
We give you the floor, Marisol. Hello, good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for that question. I would like to extend my greetings to my sisters from the Amazon Basin, to each one of you present here today in this important space that was made possible by technology. We can use technology to keep promoting environmental awareness, to better understand each other. And yes, not that long ago, we were in the uh, in COP with this proposal for a pact for life, the Amazon for life. There was We were members of a coalition made up of women who have been working in the territories. Unfortunately, we are confronted with public policy that exclude women, that don't recognize their value and their contributions. They don't recognize what they do in their communities or organizations, let alone in the state. And a clear example is this space, the Conference of the Parties, that don't really see women but indigenous peoples as part of the solution to the problems that we are all, each one of us, confronted with. Every inhabitant of planet Earth is confronted with those issues. I come from the Tupac Amaru community, the Quechua people in the Amazon rainforest in Peru. I was president of the FEPI Quechua Federation for 3 years. I was the first woman to have that position in this indigenous structure. And that, of course, is a benchmark. Just like Sarah Omi, who was the lawyer from her indigenous people, I also accomplished this. And this is one of the main pillars in our territories, one of the main pillars that allow us to break barriers, stereotypes, and we are able to do things in the territories with our sisters from the territory because as of today, we're not just observing. We want to empower women. We want to make sure that they are decision makers. We want to make sure that they amplify their voices and give more visibility to actions through their ancestral knowledge. But not only that, we're working on strengthening the youth. And not long ago, we launched the School of the New Generation, harvesting Zeet, which focuses on the youngest. And why? Because we were able to see along the way their weaknesses. There was a weakness. Adults, the wise from the territory, sometimes were not were not given responsibilities to the younger generations. And if they did, they didn't focus on capacity building. That's why we realized that we needed to teach them how to be leaders, how to do advocacy, how to defend our home, which is the territory. Both men and women, we contribute to the defense of the territory. We are life defenders. We not only protect women, we protect many brothers and sisters who have special abilities. And sometimes they forget that. Sometimes they forget their strengths. When there is a fire, we lose biodiversity, we lose animals, and we are not always able to restore that. The same happens to our brothers and sisters. Right now, illegal mining is gaining ground, affecting our rivers, deforestation in the roads, drug trafficking is also and violence is also increasing. And of course, the youth, the younger generations are affected. The roads not only bring invasion and pollution, but also unwanted pregnancies, HIV infections against their daughters and sisters. So these are very serious human rights and environmental rights violations. Sometimes our allies are not aware of this, our support networks are not aware of this, because unfortunately, in our region, we have problems in terms of access to justice in the entirety of the Amazon basin because of the distances, the lack of connectivity. And this is how we find sisters in different we meet sisters in other spaces. Christine, for example, Sarah, we are sisters and members of the Global Alliance because of the ways we covered individually. In Peru, more specifically, we also created the network of women defenders of life, and we are articulating around issues such as oil spilling, rape against young girls. We work with our sisters from Peru in favor of all of our sisters, all Peruvians. However, funds don't really reach communities, and there is such a big need, such huge gaps in terms of education, healthcare, connectivity that that we can't really advance our climate action agenda. We are working on a smaller scale, and we realize that our weakness is that we don't have internet. We don't have internet. We know what the issues are, and we need to find solutions. And that way, well, people need a bank account to have access to direct funds. If that's the case, we need to work on that. We need to find solutions to bridge these gaps. I work with sisters from 6 different associations, 6 communities, and we work not only on recovering plants and vegetables, but also timber, and we focus also on healthy diets. We are trying to identify which fruits from the zone are now disappearing, what types of timber and trees. Our goal is to reforest the forests. We are healing micro basins in our territories because we can talk about water security and food security without focusing on this impact. Therefore, we women are focusing on reforestation, on the recovery of the land, and the men are have created patrols to do surveillance in the territories. They articulate within the communities to make sure that governance is effective. However, the Peruvian government doesn't take any actions. Now, in the Bajo Guayaga region, on average, we are 15 people that have protection measures, have been subjected to protection measures, and they are now, I myself, benefit from those measures, from those protection measures. And now our crime is defending life because corruption is pervasive in our government, exclusion is pervasive, as well as criminalization and also a negative perspective
Okay, you
on
need to
indigenous
cancel. We'll
leaders.
never make it
So
back. I don't know how to cancel in here.
sorry, it seems like someone had their mic on. So we need to use also social media because, well, our enemies use social media to take actions against us, and people are not really focusing on everything that we are confronted with as people, as movements, as organizations. And what's more regretful is that we don't get any help when we get threats. They don't help us. They don't help us in our reforestation efforts. It is very simple to criticize, to destroy people on social media, but we still invite others to action. We invite them to stand in solidarity with us so that we can work together precisely to make sure that life has continuity in future generations. That is what the Pact for Life is all about. That is what women from the Amazon basin have been planning so that at the global level we can continue to take action. That is the key word, key action and investment financing for these initiatives, which are real solutions against climate change towards a just transition that respects environmental and human rights. I think that's all I can share with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marisol, for taking us to understand the action that you're taking in your own territories, all the risks and perils that you confront there to actually defend the land by doing restoration activities. So thank you very, very much for taking us to the Quechua territories in this time. I want to now to give the floor to Cristiano Julian Pancararu. And thank you so much for being with us, Chris. I have a question for you, and I really appreciate that you are here to share your experience. For the Pancararu people and many indigenous nations in Brazil, land rights are inseparable from dignity, identity, and survival. How are indigenous women advancing land demarcation and territorial defense today? And how do these struggles connect to safety, well-being, and the protections of indigenous women's lives, including the fight against violence? Thank you.
Bom dia, pessoal. Obrigada, Débora. Obrigada, Alejo.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Deborah. Greetings to everyone. It's very good to see Marisol. Good morning, all the women. Deborah, I'll try to be brief. First of all, I just want to justify before responding to your question. We have been working for quite some time on the updating or the national policy on medicinal plants. The idea is to move forward with a national entity to regulate the production of medicinal herbs and plants. We wanted to discuss a policy that will not criminalize our safeguards in our territories, that produce syrups, teas, and different types of traditional medicines. And when we start commercializing our products, will not be criminalized. We have been discussing this issue with the Ministry of Environment, with the UNDP, and also the Ministry of Health for the updating. So there is a long political process because we need to rely on the willing power so that we can move forward. So now we are trying to develop our legal indicators based on WHO principles and there's some other international regulations on those indicators. And those aspects will play very important role to draft the final policy in order to take into account all those aspects that we want to move forward. To answer your question, Deborah, I do believe that we women we have been always been in this stage to advance the territorial demarcation. This process has been always there. So what is different in this last decade is the perception. The perception to see how the women are leading different processes to reclaim the territories. Many territory claims are being led by women, and many policy drafts are being led by women. I do believe that now we are trying to give more visibility of this engagement of indigenous women as a movement. Because when women take office, for example, in Ababaré, and also Joana Upshana and different personalities, that have been engaged in these initiatives to think of the combat against violence and also to discuss the territorial rights is very important to understand how we look at these issues. We have been inviting different entities on board. That's why we have so many voices. In 2015, when we started with the Indigenous voice, this transformed into actions because it was not only a theme for our struggle, but it turned into action because women really wanted to show how strong they were. We organized a march in our territories. We expressed our spirit, and this was regarded as an action. So this is how we have been fighting in a solid manner because now we're talking about violence against women. We still have some barriers, but if we look at the last 5 years, we can see that we have taken some steps forwards when it comes to the discussion on violence against women and against girls, because we've been mobilizing uh, coordination with media and some other institutions. If we think about the territorial rights and also the women engagement on the struggle, it's also thinking about a movement that we need to educate in order to shake the structure, in order to voice our initiatives, to have all young women on board. But now we need to have a necessary visibility so that some policies can be triggered and consolidated. We shouldn't only think about the drafting policies, but what is most important is the implementation of the policies. And we should also be engaged. I think this is what Marisol explained. In Brazil, we want to also share because we're coming from different colonial systems that are quite similar, that are quite similar to different countries from the southern America. This has been strengthened with different types of our indigenous knowledge, our dances, our culture, our cuisine. We have been strengthening ourselves, voicing ourselves. I would like to reiterate, just to conclude my intervention, by saying, as a indigenous women movement in Brazil, we have been transforming this struggle into actions. Of course, there are losses, there are deaths. We have been crying, but we need to dry our tears. But something that is very important in this movement is how we utilize the language. We try to minimize the sorrow. We try to minimize how painful is the process. We use neologisms. We are trying to construct some expressions, for example, forestation, territorial reclaim, so that we don't try to be very cautious in the words that we selected to express our sadness. So this is how we try to educate the systems, to educate people, because we need to educate people, working on how we should be but we need to have capacity to be meaningful. And after this engagement, it's very important to think of a specific narrative that will call awareness. Because if you want to fight against violence against women, against girls, it is a way to 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 solve some of the problems that people have that have been through hard times. So this is our struggle. So if we manage to do that, we will ensure that there will be territory, there will be security, there will be food sovereignty, and also that will allow that our ancestors will be with us in order to value life as a whole. I just want to thank you all for the opportunity that was given to me. I'm quite honored to be here with you, to have this opportunity to talk. I hope that in 2026 we'll have an opportunity to meet and talk and drink coffee together. Thank you so much. Hug to all of you participants, including interpreters.
Cris. Thank you so much for bringing here the fact that we are just recognizing something that has been there, the Indigenous women leadership for recovering the lands as retomadas. It's so important to see back all the ancestral strength of women in all the trajectory of the movement, and also to bring us to reflect about how do we re-signify our experience to heal. This is such a powerful message that we need to keep in mind. And I wonder now if we have Aissatou with us, because we have many Claires. and I don't know if Aissatou is already connected. Aissatou, est-ce que tu es là?
We don't know if you're here, Aissatou. Yes, I'm here. Okay, thank you very much for being here. I'm going to take the floor in English so that it is easier for the interpreter to work. Merci beaucoup, Aissatou.
Pastoralist realities shape Indigenous women's struggles for land rights in Central Africa? And what leadership roles are women taking to protect their territories? Thank you so much.
Aissatou, vous avez la parole. Thank you very much. It is true that women leadership in Central Africa is. I'm sorry, I'm going to turn off my phone and work from my computer. We hear you loud and clear. So, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all participants. I'm very happy to participate in this webinar. I have not been feeling well since the morning. I have a headache, so I wasn't sure I would be able to participate, but I'm here. Regarding the women leadership in Central Africa, it is true that Borough are the pastoralists, and we are faced with a lot of challenges in Central Africa. We have the mobility issue, which is a major challenge for women. We also have the tenure-related challenges that is really important for the pastoralists, particularly within the framework of mobility. The pastoralist tenure is different from the normal regular tenure. Also, we have the transhumance corridors, the water point, access to water. This this is for what concerns the pastoralists. It is really important for us because without having access to those territories, we cannot even exist. Mobility cannot even exist. So there is also the traditional knowledge that is very important because without the traditional knowledge, we cannot even live or survive in the forest. We have to know where we can find water during the dry season. So also these are very interesting techniques. We also have the food knowledge. We live in the forest. The forest means everything to me. In this forest, we have to know what can we eat, how can we eat it, where can we find this food. So this is also something really important, and those knowledge are with the women. Then we have the transmission of those traditional knowledge. It has to be transmitted from the mother to the daughter, but also to the son, because some knowledge has to be detained by the boys, the men, including how to orient ourselves in the forest, in the bush, not in the forest, but in the bush, where the rain is going to come from. We have to go to meet the rain, and we have to follow the rain. These are really important knowledge that are detained by the women. We also have the women leadership. We never had a woman head of village or head of the community, when whereas the women are the persons who take care of the health, of the education of the animals, and the women of the household, of the kids. The woman is doing everything at the same time. In some occasions, men all of it, but she's not listened to. She cannot take any decision. We say behind any great man is a great woman, and we also say that um, women are consulted during the night in informal ways, but during the day, it is the men who are taking the decisions. And it is really a challenge for the women leadership. We want the women to be listened to be vocalized. We want the legal instrument at the regional, national, international level that protect women. We want it to be implemented. We also want the women to have access to minimum education, because without education we cannot understand anything. They can explain everything to us, but we will not understand anything, even after 1,000 times. If women cannot have access to education, they cannot understand anything.
We want the women to take this responsibility to raise their children in a proper manner, having the mobility and solidarity, the transhumans knowledge, and other traditional knowledges. In Central Africa, we have almost all the countries that are focused on transhumance, on the type of pastoralism, when the seasonal movement of livestock happen. So from Ripariak, for instance, we don't have my peoples only, we have the forest peoples too, and they live from hunting, for instance, and their life is similar to Dombororo's people. So they are pastorals, so they focus on using or having their own products, fruits, vegetables from their lands. And sometimes they suffer from discrimination because border peoples can use the animals that they have to have a little bit of money. However, the other peoples I'm talking about, they don't have even don't have animals to sell. So there is even discrimination among them between these two peoples. There are different issues also when it comes to traditions or violation, rapes towards kids, kidnapping, murders. There are a lot of discrimination in the DRC, for instance. So we see people suffering from that in war, in conflict, in places where there is war happening. There is also the army, the local army. So where can they live, the indigenous peoples I'm talking about? There is no organization taking into account these women who are victims. Sometimes there are some associations taking into account this, but they are very small. But a good leader cannot live in some municipalities because of the danger. So even the sub-regional coordinator cannot live in this specific municipality because he can even be kidnapped because of this advocacy. So there is a struggle behind. There are a lot of things happening in Africa, and the main victims are women. And this is part of Ripaliac's activities, Ripaliac actions, and we count on our partners here present in the meeting. I see Klua, for instance. Thank you very much. I see many other partners. I cannot mention all of them, but I really thank your support and also your presence in this type of meetings so that you can listen to our struggles and see how you can help. There are many, many things to share, of course, but of course I cannot take more time to go into details. But what is going on in Chad or other places in Central Africa, it's more or less what I shared. This is just an overview. Thank you to Gloria too, who is carrying out an perfect job accompanying us. She's carrying out a great job. As a coordinator, I have never seen this type of work that carried out by other coordinators in our organization previously. So thank you very much to everyone. I'm available for any comment or remark. Thank you very much.
I'm gonna switch to English so to make the life more simple for interpreters. But thank you so much for this powerful sharing of experience where you cover so many areas that Indigenous women have to face in the Congo Basin. And I really appreciate that you don't shy of connecting the dots and asking us to see beyond what we're usually discussing to go back to the priorities of Indigenous women on the ground. And so thank you very much for that. And sharing the connection between traditional knowledge and the education and the importance of basic education for women is such an important point. So with that, I think we're closing the first segment of this webinar, where we could hear leaders from different regional areas that covered the GSTC Indigenous Women Leadership Group. And now I would love to go to the second part of our webinar, where we're going to focus on the case studies, on some experiences that are happening now in Brazil that are very powerful and give us some lessons and some reasons to hope and keep on going with this long struggle that we are immersed in.
I'm going to speak in Portuguese because we're going to have one of our guest that's coming from Ceará. I'm very honored to be able to talk to Juliana Alves. Thank you very much, Juliana, for being here with us today. It's a pleasure meeting you. I have heard a lot about you, but I haven't had the chance to meet you in person. Juliana is the chief of the Genipapo Canimbe people. She is co-founder of Amiga, together with Cris and other very strong and wonderful women. And now she is also secretary for the indigenous people in the state of Ceará in Brazil. It was very powerful, very inspiring. See your experience and your work in the Women's March and bringing this strength to the process of land demarcation that has been happening in Ceará, but it also has an impact nationally and even internationally. So I wanted to talk to you about the political articulation in this historical moment. To begin with, in the state of Ceará, officially, three indigenous territories were homologated, marking a historic shift for the state of Ceará that have long faced delays and invisibility in land recognition. And so, from your experience leading this process, what can you share with us what made this political and institutional articulation possible, and what lessons can other states or other regions can learn from Ceará's path? And also, how important was indigenous women's leadership in this process for it to succeed? Thank you for being here, Juliana. Yes, we can hear you. My internet is a bit unstable, but we can hear you, we can see you. Exactly when I was going to start speaking. No, we can hear you.
I think she has issues, connect, connection issues, Juliana.
I think we can hear you, but you can't hear us. Sorry, I had to come to my phone. No, that's okay. We can hear you. Okay. In my computer, my internet's been a bit off, but here, let me get something to support. First of all, good morning. I'd like to thank the invitation. For me, this was really important when Gloria invited me, asking if I was available. And I immediately said, Gloria, yeah, I even thought that it was going to be the next day, but I thought initially, I think I'm going to be able to join. But first of all, I want to say it's a real pleasure to be able to build this together. It's really important to register that every path that these indigenous women have been building in their states has everything to do with the struggles that they have with their buddies, their territories, in their struggles, in their tragic, in their path, in their historical and scene. So how do women get to these spaces? I have important teachers starting within my own home. My mom, who is my leader, Cacique Pequena. And in fact, now here in Brazil, we have the ENEM, that it's a test. So our students are able to be assessed and they can be allowed to go to the public universities, the public and free universities. And this test, ENEM, there was an entire question about Cacique Chief Pequena. So I come from this path, this feminist path, fighting with women, that has this women empowerment. And this goes way beyond the speech. It's something that is done in practice. So to talk a little bit about what we have been building about this political articulation and this historic movement. For us in Ceará, it was a historic reparation that our government in the state of Ceará, in the national level, together with President Lula and also our governor Mano Freitas, they wanted to recognize these people, not only the right to what is in the Brazilian Constitution of 1988, but also together build something with these peoples. So we brought this path from the indigenous movement and the struggles of the indigenous movement to this governmental scene without forgetting where we come from, without forgetting our roots, our humility, because we are here building and we're going to get something back, but it's very short. Our time here is very short. We are here, the time that I'm here today, as the first secretary for the indigenous peoples to the secretariat that was constructed in 2023 in the state of Ceará, I am completely convinced that what I do here today for our indigenous territories in the state of Ceará, when I go back to my territories, I will see a little spot of what has been built. So I'm used to saying that we don't have time to waste. We don't have time to stop and take a breather because everything goes very fast. And our governor has been saying, Secretary, we need to do state policies. We're not doing governmental policies. So then we have been doing this construction during these last years, and we have presenting many different actions. And at the same time that we are here building public policies for the indigenous territories, we're also executing them. So what it is one line that goes and the other one line that's going, because we are thirsty for our peoples that they are historically paid back with everything that the Brazilian states owes to these people. So when we started our work in 2023, we started to do advocacy work when it comes to the demarcation of indigenous territories. So now we have a cooperation with a technical cooperation agreement with the former governor of Ceará, that we are going to see where this cooperation is, and we're going to rewrite these terms that in the Institute for Farming agreement, and together with our minister Sonia Guajajara, we were able to advance in this agreement. And in the same, we brought Joênia, we brought the minister Sonia Guajajara, and we did a big event in the indigenous territory, Lagoa do Japé, and we had a great group of people, and we did a great moment to create this agreement, to build upon this agreement, to have the demarcation, and this being guaranteed with resources from the state. Our government, he gave resources so that FUNAI was able to do this process. This process is legitimate because we know that the state alone cannot demarcate the lands, but it can it can do advocacy, it can give resources, it can do the budget. So these peoples, they can have their lands demarcated as it's agreed in the Brazilian Constitution of 88. So we're running against time, and in January we started the process of demarcating, and as a consequence, this ended with the indigenous peoples Capeba. We started with the my people, the Genipapo Canimbe. It's a very small people, and we have 570 peoples, 150 families. So it's a territory of 163 Brazilian hectares. And we started this process of demarcating the territories. And then we went to the peoples Acararabi and then Picarambi in two different cities and where the people Pitaguari in the city of Jaguanistão are. And lastly, we went to the territory Tapeba, which is the biggest indigenous people in the state of Ceará, almost 1,700 indigenous people in this community. So we handed this to FUNAI, and then as a consequence, we started working so we could advance and to be able to have these indigenous lands homologated. So our indigenous minister, she did not rest. She acted very strongly together with the different secretariats and the ministries. We were able to give this to the indigenous movement in Brazil, to the indigenous peoples in Ceará. So now we still need to homologate the territories of the people Tapeba, and we really want that this territory, because it's one of the first peoples to be recognized in the state of Ceará, we have a debt to these people. So we really want that this territory should be homologated. And now in this legitimate process, with all the paths that these women have been creating, I want to register that we are in the process of an inclusion of the indigenous people of the Tremembé people. So now the state of Ceará is in a state where it's coming from a state that made unable the struggles of the indigenous people. It didn't recognize the struggles of the indigenous people, and even had letters signed in previous moments by authorities at the times that would say that there were no indigenous peoples in the state of Ceará. So we're coming from this scenario where there were no demarcation process to a moment where in Brazil, it's one of the states that has been doing the most demarcation and working with recognizing the indigenous people and all within this political scenario that we have been seeing today. And it's important to highlight that this important historical moment is happening because we have these commitments with people who have been in leadership. The indigenous women, they really count not only with the sensitivity of the people of what they see. We know that women are very sensible, but yes, they are sensible, but they also are very strong and they have strategies for the fight. I would say that we wouldn't have been able to do this if we didn't have Sonia Guajajara in the Ministry for Indigenous Peoples that every day is emphasizing these historical reparation that we need to keep advancing together with the fights of these people. But it's not the people that are fighting in parallel as a symbol, but we need to do this reparation saying that these people, they are as good as or even better all the political policies that our governments do. So to be able to go beyond the demarcation, we had the PA Indigenous, that it was a program for where our farmers that have been planting and they sell their products in the cities. Today, this program here in Brazil, it comes to the indigenous territories so we can advance in food security, food sovereignty. And so our small farmers that have been working within the territories, they send forward their produce, their products to the next stage of this process, so their families can be fed, or the children who are part of within the indigenous system. So it's a feeding system that is managed by the indigenous, is planted and consumed within the territories, and it gives safety, but also funding to these small farmers. And beyond this, we have the program in our secretariat that we're trying to bring capacity building together with the secretaries, and we have a very strong partnership with the Secretariat of Social Protection, bringing courses, helping with documentation, bringing citizenship within the territories, because we need to bring forward the people's compared to their invisibility in the past. So we need to bring capacity building, and through this we're going to do this historic reparation. And President Lula, in his speech, he reinforces that it's not only about demarcating and homologating, it goes beyond this. We need to give back the territorial ownership to the indigenous peoples, but also to build policies within the territories guaranteeing education, sports, good living conditions for these people. And this is what we have been doing in the state of Ceará. We're not tired. Now we have 10 arañinhas. Maybe you don't know exactly what this word means, but it's like a football field, a soccer field. It's a policy for the Brazilian government. And in the state of Ceará, we have 10 that are being constructed, and we have another 4 to be built. So in total, 5 of these will be launched. And this is a consequence of a project that the indigenous women brought forward in 2022. So all this scenario that is beautiful now, it's not just because of the struggles of our parents now, but you have to see and to bring value to the struggles and the work that the indigenous women have been doing. We are tracing a political project that is the Bancada do Cocá that started in 2022 and in fact 2019. And the indigenous women, they get together so we can bring from each of the Brazilian biomes that we can advance politically, because we had a very bad government that went behind. But please tell me how much time I still have, and please tell me in Portuguese. It's about time. And it's important to highlight that we had this ungovernment that denied rights to the indigenous peoples of Brazil, that said that they wouldn't demarcate a centimeter, and they didn't. And in fact, they removed resources from the Brazilian people and made that women within their plenitude treating not only the indigenous women, but all the Brazilian women with lack of respect. And many times, very hidden, made that the laws were ripped down and thrown into the trash. So maybe people who are here today can't understand these learnings, but us as Indigenous women with our knowledge, with our spirituality, we have learned. We've learned that it's within the political spaces that we build everything, but it's also within the political spaces that everything can be destroyed. So we need to advance politically. Today, we have been working within the struggles of our territories by occupying the state governments, the municipal governments. We don't have any kind of representation within the legislative process, but we need to think about this for the election in 2026. And today we have Célia Shakiraba in the federal government. And we have one of our colleagues that wasn't able to take her seat, but we are still struggling. And in order for us to have this national and international demarcation and reparation, women, Indigenous women, need to be in this spaces of power. But for us, it's not just about power, but it's a space for this legitimate decision making and for them to listen to our people, because that's where how our people live or not live is being decided. So we're in this moment that we can have many more Indigenous candidates that are committed to the struggle and that are committed to the territories, because it's not only enough to be Indigenous. Yeah, it's important to be an Indigenous woman, but also be a woman who fights, who recognizes who came before me, who recognizes the ones that came before my own path and are fighting for this generation that is now, but also thinking about the ones that will come in the future. Today, my goal is 1 in 6 months. My little one, Navi, she is 1 year and 6 months, and I need to leave a legacy. So Navi in the future, she can think, oh, this was my grandmother who did it. It was my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my aunt that had the courage to break all these structures that we have in national and international levels, so we can today have our register, and we guarantee through the public defense in our state that are Indigenous in the state of Ceará, they can have in their birth documents the name of their Indigenous people. In Ceará, this was something that didn't happen, but Mavi, my great daughter, has her name Mavia Alves Genipapo Canimbe. And so we are dealing with all this process. It's still not over, but we have a lot to share with the Brazilian government within this collective construction, respecting all the spaces. And we're teaching the Brazilian government how to be a real government, listening to the peoples and going to the territory. And with the people, you can build important concepts. So it's important to think and to go to the territory. It's not in the spaces of these laws need to be made not only in Brasilia, but also in the people's territories, because my emergency might not be their emergency, but we need to be in the territory so they can tell me clearly what they need, if it's just their territory or if they need more emphatic stories. So I would like to thank, I would love to stay, but it's the end of the year where things are happening. But I leave my greetings to everyone who is here so we can continue to build this great network. I know that we have a lot to collaborate with the Indigenous women who are abroad and also here, that we can collaborate, and you can collaborate with the the Brazilian Indigenous women, because we are eternally learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much to share with us. We are very much we really appreciate the work that you did to connect a very important connection that changes the structures for the upcoming generations. Thank you so much to share with us all your work. And then we'll have opportunity to listen to Giovanna. She's co-founder. She also has a very important infrastructures of, she's also a secretariat to promote Indigenous rights in the Ministry of Indigenous. Thank you so much to be with us throughout this session. So now the floor is yours to share with us your experience. Your experiences is marvelous. I just want to to mention that Brazil has been living a very historical moment because during COP30 we discussed, and this is a very long process that started and give the first strong steps in Belém. So thank you very much, Giovanna, to be here with us to share your experience. Good morning, can you hear me? Good morning, good afternoon, all of us. First of all, I just want to thank for the invitation to be in this session with the very, very important women that inspire me. I just want to salute everyone that is following us. I just want to salute the moderates, Deborah, and each of the participants that has been following this session from different parts of the world. As a public manager, I'm very much honored to be here with you to share our work that have been conducted within the ministry, have been contributing in territorial issues. I'm not talking about an institution, but I'm talking about as a woman that witnessed this struggle on daily basis. Territory for us is an extension of our body and our spirit struggling in favor of our territories. It's to fight in favor of our life. I just want to share with you our advances that we celebrated in COP30. They resulted from a serious commitment, political commitment, and also the strengthening of our ancestors, tireless ancestors, especially from the indigenous women. Just to give you the context of the advancement or achievement, it's very important to understand the scenarios that we were confronted with. Juliana tried to give you the context. Brazil had a total paralyzation of territorial demarcation, and that period was a frontal attack to our rights, and especially to indigenous people. What plays a very important role for the achievement were three important factors. First of all, uh, the willing power and the establishment of the ministry that is being led by Sonia Guajajara. She came from the national articulation of the women's struggle. She has got a very beautiful path because she has been very much engaged in the indigenous movement as well. This was very important to trigger the indigenous rights in Brazil. First of all, we have our first space in the States. We are leading strategic areas with budgets, with the power to trigger processes that have been blocked. Since the establishment of the ministry up to 2025, we achieved 20 homologation of indigenous territories. Only 11 territories had been homologated from 2023 until 2019. And in Belém, we announced that had been homologated, and 7 reports of the limitation had been approved. We have a territory that was waiting for demarcation for more than 10 years. This is a concrete example of how the rights are being translated into the rights. The second factor was political incidents. This is a strength that made the government to act. In August 2025, more than 5,000 women marched in Brazil with the theme, Our Body, Our Territories. We are the guardians of the planet to heal the territory. It was not just a symbolic act. We demonstrated our political power, and it was a kind of affirmation that they are on forefront of this process. And it was very important to come up with a dialogue platform, the National Secretariat to promote the indigenous rights with partnership with the Ministry of Women and also indigenous struggle, organized the first national conference. This event marked a very important moment for different Brazilian biomes, which terminated in signing 50 proposals. For example, one of the robust proposals proved that the territory is our first demands, and the indigenous women are very much clear as to what they really want. Apart from that, the COP village that we organized in Belém during COP 30, it hosted people from 87 countries and hosted more than 3,000 women, and the majority number of the participants were women. It was not only a place to host participants, but it was a cultural and political space where indigenous women demonstrated their capacity to organize, articulate, and leading in a global arena. So the advancement in the demarcation was a very important achievement on the negotiation tables. The leadership of indigenous women defines the processes. We are the ones in the leading front, protecting our territories, building bridges with the social movements and the states. So these connections is absolute. For us, indigenous women, there is no distinction between the violence against the territories and our people. The fight against the climate, and if we fight for our territories, we are fighting in favor of our communities, our children. According to scientific data, shows that the deforestation is, is less in the territories that are protected. Our territories are very important green barriers. Between 1990 and 2020, the indigenous territories reduced 10%. We indigenous people, we protect 80% of the remaining biodiversity of the territory, of the world. Therefore, demarcating the indigenous territories is not a favor for us. It's a very important initiative. It is an essential measure for Brazil and for the world to comply with the goals to protect the biodiversity. If Brazil homologates an indigenous territory, is ensuring the climate regulation and protecting reservoirs that provide water to the planet. Apart from the data on the carbon where the life of women is at risk, the invasion of our territories leads to based violence-based gender based violence increased in a great deal, and the sexual violence also increased. And half of the women or the girls that have been violated are young girls. So this reality take us to articulate the protection of our territories, because we fight against the violation of our territories. When our territories are invaded, people bring the sexual exploitations, the human violence. So the environmental violation impacts our protection network against sexual violence. And also, we need to ensure food security, to have our, our, our rivers safe, to preserve our medicinal plants, and everything should be very well connected. That's why in copy 30, the indigenous delegations has the main demand the territorial demarcations. The Brazilian government responded to those demands with concrete actions, with the direct dialogues with indigenous people. And our state is an example, because they show how things can be done. Despite the achievements,
The Congress, the National Congress insisted in transforming it into a law and to have this constitution. And this juridical had many problems and put the life of our indigenous people constantly in risk. So we also have the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples and FUNAI that defend the need for more human resources for this process and the delimitation of all the lands that need restoration. But there's a moment that sees our people as, creating an important struggle for the land demarcation, but there's also struggle and they're consistent facing deforestation and so FUNAI has been even more and more affecting and the uninclusion of the invader and the path to guarantee that these advancements become permanent. There is a need of a very strong and firm coordination. First of all, the Brazilian government, their decision against the marco temporal should be consolidated definitely, and all this need to, in the Brazilian Congress, to revert this, need to be stopped. So the right of Indigenous people can't be stopped. And we have been working nonstop for the institutional strengthening of the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples within FUNAI. These institutions, they need robust resources and a permanent structure to be able to accelerate all the demarcation process that are still standing, and especially to protect the demarcated lands. Third of all, we need a political, a zero policy against the invaders, that all the lands that are invaded, the indigenous lands that are invaded, they need to be priority. So the Indigenous Peoples Ministry created a consolidation policy to create actions to protect the territorial ownership exclusively for the indigenous, especially for those who went through the process of unintrusion, which is the process of removing the invaders. So we cannot live together with the environmental crime and the violence against our indigenous territories. And fourth point, and maybe the most important one, is to guarantee the indigenous protagonism, especially of women, in the management of the territories and the environment. For example, our ministry that coordinates the indigenous peoples, that Seisa Pitaguari, that it also comes from the same land as Juliana Alves, who just spoke. So it's incredibly important to bring to these spaces these women who have been having this experience and have their space and are helping us in this struggle for our survival. So these are women who have been in these spaces. So we need to think about this protection long term that will only be efficient with our protagonism. So we need to strengthen indigenous women's in all spaces of participation and guarantee EPIC in all projects that affect our territories, and support the leadership of these women within our communities. So the future of the Amazonia, of Cerrado and Mata Atlântica, and all the other biomes in Brazil and the world, they depend on our capacity to keep our territory safe. And this safety depends on the strength and the leadership of the indigenous women. And with this commitment, we will continue in the front lines as the ancestral acknowledgement of the earth, of Mother Earth, thinking about the future generations. And I would like to once again thank about the invitation and the opportunity to be able to share a little bit about our experience here in Brazil. And I am available to continue this conversation that was very helpful today. Thank you very much. And also to thank Gloria, that is a person who came in our path to really push forward our struggles and also our voices in all our spaces, all these spaces. So I think this moment is really important for us. This place where we are now, it's very strategic. And I know this is only possible with our union, with our way of organizing as indigenous peoples, as indigenous women that have been highlighted more and more, and we're able to be wherever we want to be in the spaces of coordination movement, to be secretaries, to be ministers. So this for us is really, really important with our union and our organization. And that said, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Giovanna. It's a pleasure to be able to wrap the year with this energy and these experiences of the people who were able to get this through the collective effort. So there's a lot of hope and we're looking towards the future. So now I wanted to call Devi Agrai. She comes from Indonesia, and she
has been amazing on the movement of indigenous women in Indonesia, and she has been a key actor to create a movement inside a month of Indigenous women. And I really just wanted to give her the floor for a small intervention that might take us now to the end of this webinar, where we want us to just reflect a little second on what do we want for 2026 and what are the words and the message that we're taking for next year. So Debbie, are you there? Thank you.
Ya, saya ada di sini. Good. What you call this is it's a very night in Indonesia, but I don't know in your region. Okay. I'm using bahasa Indonesia, and I think it's
Yes, go ahead.
First of all, my name is Devi Anggraini. Thank you for the opportunity for sharing with you all here. And you are all the women who fight for the indigenous people. And I'm from Perempuan Aman. The organization name is Perempuan Aman. And this is the indigenous women organization in Indonesia. And our members is around 5,075 people in 120 chapters, local chapters. And Perempuan Aman is aware that since our declaration in 2012, we didn't have any single data about indigenous women, but the fight for of indigenous women to and maybe some of you know Aman for the Indigenous Peoples Organization. So indigenous women are the people behind the movement, and they are the people who fight and who protect their home, and also building strategies from time to time to ensure that the indigenous territories are not removed from them, from the indigenous women, indigenous peoples. And since 2015, we've been working on the use of specific terminology. So we call it Wilayah Kelola Perempuan Adat in Indonesian, which means the indigenous territory. And indigenous women should be strong. We're not a kind of quote unquote attachment. We're not the complementary part of indigenous people. We are leaders who work and fight as hard as the other indigenous peoples. And we are working hard to collect data and to use the data for intervention at both local, national, and also in at global level. And what we are working on now is that maybe you think it's something ordinary, but we start from the domestic life of indigenous women. It's not only limited to kitchen, yeah, literally, but the spaces which are controlled by indigenous women and their authority on deciding on what they need to plant, the kind of plants that they need to grow. And this is something political to make sure that we can keep women, we can maintain the movement of the indigenous women. And we also want to make sure that the arguments of the existence of indigenous peoples in Indonesia, which is until now not recognized in the formal law in Indonesia, we need to show that despite the lack of recognition from the government, you know that now the officials of Indonesian government. They have started wearing outfit of indigenous peoples, produced by indigenous peoples, but the government still has not recognized the existence of indigenous peoples. So for indigenous women, this is a way of advocacy, a way for us to advocate this thing, not in a political way, but in a way that we can show our existence. And we want to also make sure that the advocacy on land, on the rights of indigenous peoples can be brought into discussions in more flexible ways. And the pressure also on the international level really helps because indigenous peoples, indigenous women movements are still very weak, I think, now. And this is something that is really crucial for us. And in also, especially in Indonesia, yeah, we are experiencing the same, I think, like what other indigenous peoples and indigenous women in the rest of the regions in the world. And we are we're not moving mostly in the at the national level. We are uh, using the data about our indigenous peoples, and we use that specifically in a kind of engineering participatory mapping. So we want to identify the strength, the power of indigenous women, indigenous peoples, and we also collect data on the territories and the social as well as ecological crises that are happening and being faced by the indigenous women, and also in this case how we can be recognized not legally only, but how we can have changes that can put women on the same level. And we bring this data, also combine it with the data on gender-based violence, and we bring it to the national level. And we have strong recommendations to the government of Indonesia to accelerate the process, the legal process of including indigenous peoples and indigenous women in the legal law of Indonesia. And there are 2 points that I want to highlight. First, the fulfillment of the collective rights of indigenous women is something that which is very crucial that should be recognized, and it refers to the general recommendation from the regulation number 39. And the second point is the provision of clean water and for women. And as you know, this is really something hard to achieve in the midst of extractive industries, etc. And we also want the knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, to be transferred to the next generations. And we are trying to challenge a regulation issued by the Ministry of Forestry and Environment in Indonesia. They are talking. I'm really sorry, but there is a background noise. I cannot. Your interpreter cannot hear the speaker.
I'm sorry,
I'm
David.
really sorry, but your interpreter cannot interpret because
Yes, and we're heading
there's a
to the
background
time
noise
limit. Yeah,
which is interfering.
see, it's pretty. Yeah, there's a background noise, but it's over. I think we have a cross with another call, but it's actually Yeah, we have to close, but maybe if you can just close your discourse. Mhm.
Yeah, so yeah, actually, I'm about to conclude this, and so I want to say that how can we uh, use the data and also the everything that we have now about indigenous women for our fights for the indigenous territory, and we are I'm talking about the register for registering the territory and also the knowledge of the indigenous women, indigenous peoples, so we can maintain the indigenous territory from time to time. So yeah, I think that's all from me. I'm sorry for being late and not following from the beginning. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much, Debbie. It's extremely important to hear from your experience and all the advancements that have been ongoing in Indonesia. And I really want now to close our session asking you all, after all the lessons that we have heard, maybe you can share on the chat, or you can share taking the micro. What word captures a core priority or message that can guide our global action of Indigenous women? How can we support Indigenous women movement in 2026? What are the words that resonates with you? ¿Cuál es la palabra que los hace pensar? And if yeah, you can use the chat, and I encourage indigenous leaders from the women that are with us to share the word that inspires you, and to use the chat to say a word and share with us. Um, we arrived to the end of our conversation, and I really wanted to thank you all for being with us. And I just wanted to remind you that the declaration, it's open for signatures, and to endorse and support the Indigenous Women Pact for Life of Indigenous women, you can sign the declaration on the website that is shared on the chat, and you can read the pact and support where you are this global movement that it's very ingrained on territories. And I really hope to see you next year in this amazing work supporting all these territories. So thank you so much for being with us, for connecting, and I wish you a very good end of 2025 and an amazing 2026 together. So thank you so much. Thank you, the interpreters. Thank you for taking a little bit of more time to stay with us. We appreciate you very much. Muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros.